We're now joined by Bradley Tusk, founder and CEO of Tusk Ventures. He's also advising Bloomberg's campaign in Washington, D.C. pollster and political strategist Frank Luntz. I'm going to go to Frank first. Frank, the mayor's now out there, or I should say the former mayor is now out there campaigning on the trail for the first time. You're seeing the blowback already from some of the leading Democrats in the field. And the question I have is in terms of how you think the mayor can or can't, I don't know where you land ultimately, capture that enthusiasm gap between the sort of very, very left and this sort of moderate left that he's trying to represent.
Well, first, to respond to Elizabeth Warren, she's trying to buy the election.
Right.
She's offering Medicare for all. She's offering free health care for illegal immigrants. She's offering free college tuition. She's offering free everything. And so is Bernie Sanders. And if that's not trying to buy the election, I don't know what is. Now, as far as Bloomberg, in South Carolina, Nevada, Iowa, New Hampshire, the first four states, that represents 4% of the Democratic delegates. The week after that, March 3rd, which is Super Tuesday, there will be almost 40% of the delegates chosen. Mike Bloomberg has the money and the time to make a difference in those states. These other candidates are spending tens of millions of dollars on just 4% of the electorate. Bloomberg will have the opportunity to make investments in these other states when all the other candidates are literally bankrupt. That's the positive for him. The negative for him is that Democrats aren't asking for another billionaire to run. They're not giving Tom Steyer, the other billionaire in this race, they're not giving him significant support. To be blunt, Democrats don't like millionaires and billionaires, and it's going to be very hard for Bloomberg to reach that majority. He's going to have to draw upon independents and Republicans who can vote in about half of their Super Tuesday contest.
Although anybody can see the difference between Tom Steyer and Mike Bloomberg. I mean, Frank, it's like it's hard to even say those two names in the same set. They are billionaires, but that's about the only similarity.
Bradley, what do you think the mayor has to do to overcome this issue of folks out there who just say, by being a billionaire unto itself, that is a disqualifying event?
Ultimately, we have to frame this election about, do you want to elect someone who's ideologically pure but loses to Trump and reelects him, or do you want someone who can win in November? If Democratic voters prefer to have someone that can be voted the most woke on Twitter, then, yeah, that's not going to be Mike Bloomberg. That's Warren or Sanders, and they go on to lose in 2020. If they want someone who can win, it's Mike.
Do you think, though, that voters in the Democratic Party are sitting around saying to themselves, this one's going to have a better chance of beating Trump, and therefore I'm going to support that one?
I think it's not that complicated. When someone like Warren is offering free Medicare for all and college tuition, all these things, and embracing kind of socialism in a de facto way, voters understand that well enough to say, okay, how does this match up against Trump? They're hyper aware of who Trump is, and if they really don't want him there, then they're thinking intelligently, who's best fit to replace him. In a general election, that's probably Mike.
Hey, Frank, isn't there some statistic if you didn't do well in either Iowa or New Hampshire or something, or finish in the top three, you've never had a nominee? But it's a totally different ball game with a guy who can spend $150 million, though. I mean, should we look at history to judge whether you need to win one of those early primaries?
Let's look at history. Let's look at common sense. Rudy Giuliani had this strategy back in 2008. By the time they eventually got to Florida, even before his first state, he was out of it. So, yes, history does suggest you have to win either Iowa or New Hampshire.
Might be different now, though, I think.
But let me give you the statistic. 69% of Democrats would prefer someone who can beat Donald Trump. 31% prefer someone who is very close to them ideologically.
Right.
Make no mistake, beating Donald Trump is the highest priority for primary Democrats.
Yeah, I thought that was Biden. He's just poor guy. What happened? Is damaged goods, Bradley?
We talked about this. Right, Biden cannot complete a sentence. He cannot complete a thought.
I have trouble completing sentences, but I'm already moving on to the next one.
That's why we're not nominating you.
That's why I'm not running.
Otherwise, you would just be a shoo-in.
Yeah, I'd be a shoo-in. I don't know if you guys read the piece. There's a wonderful piece in The Atlantic, though, about Biden's stuttering problem. Did you read this piece?
No.
It's actually a very touching piece. I don't know if you think it explains this idea that Frank has that he can't complete a sentence.
It doesn't explain what he actually says when he finishes the sentence.
But my question to Frank is, how do you overcome the billionaire stigma if that can even be said aloud?
You have to go to certain states. Texas is a great example. Not all Democrats are from the progressive wing in Texas. It's the same thing in California, that there are some states that allow independents and others that even allow Republicans to vote. If you can get the crossover vote in those states, and remember, guys, there's a 15% vote threshold. You have to get 15% to get a single delegate. Mike Bloomberg has the money to invest enough in every state that he will pass that 15% threshold. He could actually win more delegates than the percentage vote that he gets. Still, the majority of Democrats are on the progressive side, and once it gets down to 2 or 3 candidates, it's very hard to see Michael Bloomberg as the actual nominee.
He's going to be a punching bag for a large part of the Democratic Party. He already is. That's going to be tough.
Yeah, that's okay. But I mean, I think what you were saying earlier, Joe, I think is fundamentally the right question, which is if it's a different ball game, then by doing things very differently, Mike might surprise everyone and win.
Well, he wouldn't do it if he didn't think he wouldn't do it to fail.
I can tell you that the data shows a clear path to victory. But even putting that aside, look, we're challenging some basic assumptions. You're right. People who traditionally don't compete or win in the early states don't move on. That's usually because their fundraising dries up and they can't move on. Not really an issue.
You know what he has for everybody, Andrew, and I will say this, just across the board for most people, it would just be better if we knew now it was either going to be Trump or Bloomberg. For everybody, rather than Trump or Bernie Sanders, rather than Trump or Elizabeth Warren. So even me, yes. I think I'm welcoming that at least that's an alternative to, which is just crazy town. As you always say, you're
going to win
crazy
more
town.
from the Democrats or more from Republicans who are never Trumpers or who don't want Donald Trump around?
Well, in the general election, you're going to need a combination of both. But to win the Democratic primary, and Frank's absolutely right that there are states where people can cross over and we're going to need those votes. But if we're not able to make our case to a lot of Democratic voters, we're not going to win. But just keep one thing in mind. In 2018, I think 43 House seats flipped from Republican to Democrat, or open seats turned Democrat. Those were not, super left-wing progressive districts. Those were moderate suburban people, and that's who won.
But as Eric Cantor pointed out earlier in the program, he said, look, you've got to win Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Does Mike Bloomberg translate in the upper Midwest in some of those states?
Look, everything the man has done so far in his career has worked out pretty well, whether it was starting his own company and turning into one of the biggest in the world, or running for mayor and then doing a really great job with it, or all the things he does out of his foundation. So do I know fundamentally that he is easily the most obvious choice for people in Western Pennsylvania? No, but he seems to win time and time again.